So, everyone, thanks so much for taking the time to join our webinar hosted by Arganteal. We're here to discuss automation, orchestration, capabilities, and the operational challenges we face. So, on the call, we have our CEO, Steve Kelly. He'll be presenting later in the webinar. We have our CTO, Mark Collins. So, any questions or thoughts you wish to address, please leverage the question section, and we'll be happy to address those as we go through. And with Steve and Mark and myself on the call, we should be able to address pretty much any question that you have. My name is Pete Gore. I'll be presenting the first section and be discussing some of the challenges, what orchestration and automation are, because those words are typically used very interchangeably, and how you can address the journey as we proceed through the operational challenges that are just part of automation. So along with the business process pieces to ensure that your automation journey is successful. So with that said, many of you are on the call, I'm guessing, because automation is of a big interest to you. One of the things that you're looking at is what are all the challenges and the problems that you're going to face, and hopefully we can address some of those as we move through the presentation. And then how do you get started on this overall journey? Many people like to jump straight to the keyboard. That is going to be one of the problems that you face. And then we'll be talking about an available solution that we have from Arganteal to help you address some of these challenges as we go through. Okay, so one of the things, just to clarify here, some of the tasks that we can address with automation, as many of you know, are going to be like applications, installing applications, restarting services, rebooting servers, spinning up an environment to host a new application, and cloud automation, right? But automation is typically a single task. So from a perspective of changing a password, changing a community string on a device inside your architecture. When we think about orchestration, this is where we start talking about a coordination of these automated tasks. When they have to be done in a particular order with a certain security groups, tools, role assignments, permissions, so on and so forth. Orchestration tools use automation, obviously, but we create the processes in order to make sure that those individual tasks are able to be executed in the correct fashion, and that we're able to track the results of those automated tasks to ensure that the entire workflow is successful. So with that said, that's the definition as I proceed through the presentation. More than happy to have a discussion about that. If anybody wishes to schedule a call, more than happy to have that discussion. Okay, so jumping into some of the key business questions. So some of these should be fairly obvious, but it's going to be different based on the business that you're running. So what is it the business is trying to deliver, right? Is it applications? Is it a business outcome? Is it time to market? Is it improved outcomes? Higher SLAs for your customers? Understanding business goals is going to be very key. And jumping straight to the keyboard to try and address these things, as we'll address later on, is just not a good idea, right? So you have to think about what is your current end state, what is your current state, more to the point. Where are you wanting to get to, right? So what is the logic that you're currently leveraging? What are the business processes that you're currently leveraging? And understand that because you want to change those does not mean that you can just adopt the Big Bang Theory and make everything happen at once. This is automation, and orchestration is a journey and requires steps to get you there. And if done in the right direction, you can absolutely be successful. You will lower OPEX, you will lower CAPEX, and have a much more streamlined environment, being able to do far more with the existing staff that you have. One of the things that we'll talk about in a little bit is the automation maturity of your existing environment, right? This doesn't mean how long have you been in business. This means specifically around your infrastructure. So from an automation perspective, where are you at? Are you running by the seat of your pants? Do you have specific actions that you can execute on a regular basis because you've developed a script, but it's more opportunistic, right? And so we'll address those in a minute. And then also finally, do you have an overall automation strategy? And an automation strategy is not, I want to automate everything, right? That's an objective, not a strategy. So how do we develop that strategy? How do we look towards that strategy to drive us across our automation maturity model? And what is our time frame around that? And we'll talk about those in a lot more detail as we move forwards. So from an automation maturity model perspective, right, as I said, a lot of customers that I talk to are typically in the level 1 phrase, in high ones, low twos, right? So from a 1 perspective, minimal automation. You've got a few scripts around automation. You're not in orchestration, right? You're doing things in a silo. So your compute organization, your security organization, your network organization, or verticals is largely leveraging automation. Compute is also a big step forwards, but these are issued by persons, right? So personnel sitting at their laptops, optimizing how they organize, but running it on an ad hoc basis, which means that there is no checks and balances on the scripts that have been created. Chances are those scripts haven't been run through a dev environment or a test environment to see actually how they're going to behave and what changes and impacts they're going to have on your architecture. As you move forwards from an opportunistic perspective, you're starting to look at things on a project basis, on a run book basis, but you're still not measuring the impacts. You're still not leveraging what you can get done in what period of time. You are going to see some productivity gains to this, though, right? I mean, even like in ad hoc, as you start leveraging those scripts to be able to make changes to large portions of your environment in a single step, you are going to see some reduction in cost. As you move forwards, the idea here is to start driving efficiencies, remediating problems in a automated fashion, right? In a proactive fashion, so that you're not reactive to your entire network and what it's happening in compute and different switches, different failed cables, so on and so forth. The objective for most customers is to get to a systematic approach where we're orchestrated. We have measurements and reports coming out of those. We are proactive. So we're receiving telemetry off of the infrastructure into our measurement tools that allow us to get proactive. We have orchestrated workflows that will be triggered by certain information that is received from the infrastructure so that we can go address those in real time in a proactive fashion. And then, although you see 5 steps on here, very few companies have ever reached level 5, right? And that includes the likes of Google and places like that. Self-learning, self-healing infrastructures, AI, machine learning, it's all things coming. So a lot of people, even when they're at a very high level of automation inside their orchestration or inside their environment, you're still looking at level 4. You're still looking at mid to high level 4s, but that's in a very good place to be. You're also going to be seeing a lot of productivity gains and efficiencies developed across your infrastructure as you're at that step. So let's discuss a little more on how you're actually going to get there. Operations. You'll hear me talk about operations a lot as we move forwards. And back in the days when we first started deploying new infrastructure, a lot of organizations thought, well, I know ITIL, I know this, I know that, right? I can handle the operational aspects and the process aspects all on my own. With automation and orchestration being deployed inside your infrastructure, unfortunately, that's not the case. If you don't address the processes in your operations as you move forwards, you're just going to end up doing a lot of bad things faster, right? You have to adopt your operations and your process pieces. They have to change as you move forwards. And so even Forrester is calling this out, which is a lot of the source of this information. From an operational maturity perspective, it's critical to your business success, right? Absolutely critical. So from a strategy perspective, You can evolve your digital products over time through a series of controlled, measured experiments and testing, and then visualize what's actually going to happen and make sure that that actually manages and works as it goes through based on what you're trying to achieve. Your technology areas, the maturity in this area requires that all the elements in the digital stack be approached as code, right? So a lot of you have probably heard of the buzzwords infrastructure as code, software as a service, um, well-defined buzzwords that you can leverage. But as you talk about your technology, we want to look at the releases as they're managed, as they move through your environment. You want it well defined. You want it to be able to be rolled back, and you want it in an automated pipeline all the way through from development to production, right? Process pieces, again, we'll talk about this a lot. Operational maturity, when you look at this from an annual, a quarter, or an intermittent perspective from a collection of quality feedback on the technology that you have, you're going to look at how things get done. How do you coordinate those different activities? How do you troubleshoot issues as they crop up? Are you able to roll back the changes that you're able to make across the infrastructure so that the impact in that change window or what you're making to the organization and the infrastructure is not business impacting? And then governance. Governance is key here. Making sure that security is in place, making sure that the IT delivery lifecycle is in order, making sure that your change control is appropriately handled, and that you have the appropriate things rolled back. And for many of you who are addressing things in an auditable process, right, and have to be auditable, you want to be able to decrease that, right? And that's where governance is really going to come into play and help you achieve those objectives. All right, so as many of you know, from a problem statement perspective, right, data center software that's running inside your environment, we want to make sure that it's agile. We want to make sure that as it goes through the development life cycle, we're able to address issues of that software, right? One of the other buzzwords that you hear today, as you put these things together, is DevSecOps, DevOps, right? So development, security, and operational expertise inside your environment. One of the big challenges as you deploy software inside your environment, if you don't look at the operational aspects, if you don't look at the process aspects, you are going to start causing problems inside your environment, right? So the process of how to use this new software, the process of how to adjust your security in a real-time fashion is going to be very important. So as you can see, when we talk about technical debt and we talk about software and hardware that is running inside your environment that could be end of life, end of sale, not running the appropriate piece of software because that has security issues inside of it. The Wall Street Journal has a paper out there that talks about $1.5 trillion in technical debt across organizations in the US, right? That is huge when you think about it. So how do we address those? We spend about 100 million hours a year making changes across our organization, right? Which is about a $20 billion cost to the organization. So obviously one of the things that we're looking to do from this is optimize that, right? But if we're sticking to just the problems, that's a lot of hours, right? Depending on the size of your organization. Manual code, right? So we're creating manual code inside of the environment. We're reinventing the wheel in many situations because the existing platforms or the existing scripts that we have, the existing automation processes that we have in place, either aren't well documented, aren't available to everybody who's using it, and people just don't have access to it. So rather than search around, ask around, they recreate from scratch. And a lot of scripts are used and a lot of automation steps are used in a way that they aren't reusable, right? So for those of you who know about coding, modules, different programming languages, etc., it's key, right? So if one person's coding in Perl, one person's coding in Python, the two shall not mix. So how do we solve for that problem? The other challenge that a lot of businesses are facing is that the STEM talent is just not keeping pace with the industry needs. The different APIs that people leverage, either A, they don't understand what an API is, which is an application programmable interface, or they've been programmed in different languages. Again, going back to the Python, Perl, XML, JSON, so on and so forth. And then the intended target information, because we're not doing this as an intent-based environment, we're having to manually enter each of those steps inside of each script or each side of each automation platform. When you think about all of this as a whole, we're wasting a lot of time and a lot of money, right? So how are we going to solve for those things? And like I said, guys, feel free to post questions into the chat, and we have people monitoring those areas. So more than happy to address questions as we move along. So let's look at some of the things that we can do to make sure that you're successful, right, as we move this forwards. So starting off on the simple side of things, the operational expenditures and the operational efficiencies that we look at just from the network perspective, right? If you forget about the cloud, forget about security, all that kind of stuff, but how can we just drive operational expenditures down inside of our networking environment, right? Service activation, zero-touch provisioning, things like that. Automating repetitive tasks. So how do we follow those things, right, inside our environment? So things like password changes, community string changes, which from an auditable perspective have to be done on a regular basis. How do we automate operational processes? Again, processes and operations, very key inside your environment, right? A lot of times when we talk to customers, they're running 10, 20, 30 different tool sets inside their operational environment because there is no standardization. There is no governance on what is being done inside of those tool sets. And we end up with shadow IT across the organization because you've got a lot of smart people working for you, and they want to get things done in a what they would consider a smart and streamlined fashion. So what are some of the benefits around this? As we said, reducing in OpEx, optimizing of the workforce, right? So having some of your really smart people not doing the day-to-day mundane tasks, but have them focusing more on your higher level opportunities, your higher level business capabilities, and driving those services into your organization. As we start moving up the complexity scale, we're starting to look at the business value. So changes in change management processes, incident management processes, your inventory management, your patch management. This is where you're able to start getting into use cases, software image management, right? Huge use case. When we talk about our top 3 use cases, software image management is right up there. Inventory management, the ability to automatically update your CMDB. If everybody's being honest on the call, how many of you actually have an accurate CMDB? How many of you could actually put your hands up and say, yes, my CMDB is 100% accurate? I would bet very few, if any, right? Your incident management. So how do you handle things when they go wrong? This is really where you want to get from being reactive to proactive, right? So having that telemetry come from the infrastructure, having it parsed, having the systems make decisions that can then open tickets proactively, reroute traffic proactively, so on and so forth. So why do we want to do these things? Well, service satisfaction, right? Making sure that whoever your customers are, be it external customers, your internal customers, your different verticals like HR, so on and so forth, that they're happy, right? That they are able to do their jobs without seeing the infrastructure of IT as a roadblock to getting their things done. And then, of course, improving agility. So your time to market, your time of deploying new infrastructure, your reduction in your technical debt is definitely going to improve as you start enabling the automation and the orchestration of some of these environments. And then, again, more complex, but not undoable, right? This is going to be part of your journey. This gets you to your further up the maturity scale, right? So being able to do complex orchestration, which involves your development environment, your security environment, and rolling that out into operations. Being able to do complete application builds. So depending on the business type that you run, a lot of organizations have seasonal needs, right? So if you're in the retail business, for example, around Christmas, you may have retail sites and web servers and load balancers that are spun up that have the chance, depending on how popular the site is, to be overrun, right? Where you're then losing business because you're not able to adapt to the business demand on a automated fashion. So being able to build that automation, being able to build out new applications, new load balancers, new web servers in an automated, orchestrated fashion that allows you to increase scale. And then at the same time, also be able to scale that information and that platform down as demand lessens. Telemetry is also extremely key here. Being able to have visibility into your environment, being able to analyze what's actually happening. Again, depending on demand, the analytics can then feed your orchestration platform and spin up additional platforms, spin down based on lack of use. And then dashboards to help your operations teams understand what's happening, understand root cause analysis of what's happening inside your infrastructure should something fail, as opposed to just seeing the obvious pain point and then having to trace that back to what's actually happening further inside the infrastructure. The benefits of this, obviously, IT and business agility here. Time to market is improved, capabilities are improved, observability is improved, and your ability to then report up to the senior execs on what is happening, how it's happening, and the benefits that IT is actually returning back to the business. So we've talked about a lot of challenges here from a problems perspective. We talked about how can you start enabling success. I just want to talk about from a low-code perspective, a lot of customers have heard this as well as a buzzword from a low-code automation orchestration perspective. Steve will be talking about these products in a few minutes in a lot more detail. But we have two applications or two platforms out there that can actually help you address some of these problems at your inside your infrastructure, working with your existing tool sets. But again, doing it in a low-code fashion so that, again, we're able to reduce the level of skill that you need to have across your organization. And now you can just have a certain amount focused inside your environment, right? So one of the things that comes with these two platforms is the ability to have them as software as a service or have them on-prem. The one thing that you'll hear from these platforms is they are language agnostic. If you remember back to one of the problems, everybody coding in a different platform or a different software language is a big problem across organizations. And Adept solves this problem by being language agnostic and being able to build out those orchestration workflows using any language that you may or may not have inside your organization, and can compile that into a single workflow that you're then able to execute inside your infrastructure. Existing native sources. One of the things that we would do from a strategy perspective is set out a GitHub, understand how the check-in process, the processes and the operational processes around gathering all of your infrastructure scripts. And from a platform perspective, we do have Ascot, which will allow you to actually gather all the different scripts that are sitting inside your infrastructure and then pass those out. Again, I don't want to steal a lot of Steve's thunder. Just understand that these are coming, and he will be able to talk about those in a lot more detail in a few minutes. So many of you are wondering, having spelled out the world of doom from an automation orchestration perspective, how do I get started in a strategic fashion that is actually going to make me successful? So let's talk about that. From a delivery model perspective, we want to look at a vision, right? These things happen, guys, way before your hands ever touch a keyboard. So look at a vision. Where do you want to go with your infrastructure? What is the end state that you want to do? Is it, what are you most concerned about? Is it time to market? Is it an accurate inventory? Is it making sure that your customers are happy with what you're providing. And so the direction that you're looking for, your mission statement, your vision is very key. And a lot of you have an organizational vision statement, but now you need to drill that down to, from an automation perspective, an IT perspective, what is it that you're looking to get done as you drive this forwards? From there, we break the vision down into reachable objectives, right? So and again, bite-sized chunks. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the terms waterfall project management and agile project management and agile objectives. That's what we're looking to do here. Small baby steps that you're gonna see benefit from an OpEx perspective and a CapEx perspective in bite-sized chunks. So again, we're not looking at the big bang theory here. We're looking at how you get started. What is the objectives that I'm trying to drive to make sure that I'm successful? Again, like we mentioned earlier, now we got to think about the strategy, right? How are we actually going to make those objectives achievable? And again, it's not automate everything, right? That's not an overall strategy. So we have to understand what that strategy is, how we break that down, what are the benefits and what are the priorities of making that a reality inside your organization. And then from there, break down that strategy into achievable actions and into an achievable plan where you start seeing those benefits on a short-term basis that you can then report up and have it become a self-funding model, right? So as you're starting to be able to achieve CapEx savings and OpEx savings inside your organization, you're able to return that money back to the organization that will then continue to fund this journey that you're on. So how do we think about this journey, right? Again, not a big bang perspective, right? So you need to allow sufficient time to make this a viable solution. You need to be inclusive, right? So get away from your silos. So it needs everybody put my teeth back in the organization across multiple verticals. Can you automate on a single vertical? Absolutely. But if you're doing it on a larger scale, now you can actually start consolidating on languages, on different tool sets, on licensing, and so on and so forth, right? How do you be agile across your environment? How do you plan ahead? So from a planning perspective, you need to think about skill gaps. How long is it going to take to actually fill those gaps that you have? Your early team members that you bring in, they will set the pace, right? That you want. If they're having to learn as they go, then obviously you're going to proceed at a much slower pace, and you're going to make some mistakes. You want to start small. You want to be in an agile fashion. You want to make sure that you're updating those plans as you move forwards and on a frequent basis, and making sure that you get consensus as you move forwards. The other key thing that's going to be key to your strategy is, what is the preferred automation fit that you wish to adopt? And usually there's no one answer, right? But you're going to think about, are you going to do a DIY? Are you going to build out your own organization of developers and testers and roll that out? Are you going to have a turnkey solution where you're going to bring in a vendor who's going to lock the door behind them? They're going to do everything that you've asked them to do and then hand you the keys on the way out, right? Or are you going to have a build, operate, transfer? This is actually my preferred methodology. You bring in people who have the expertise, who have the skills. They help you build it, but you work alongside them so you can see what's happening, how it's being done, etc. And then over time, they turn the keys to the kingdom over to you. Or do you have outcome as a service? You really don't care how it gets done, so long as it gets done, right? And that's a perfectly viable solution. All depends on your organization. And then also think about, are you going to be using COTS packages or are you using open source packages? If you're using open source, you really need to think about a sandpit or a sandbox where you can test this environment, do some analysis on the traffic that's flowing in and out, and make sure that you're that the tools are behaving, that the modules are behaving before you ever put it even into your dev environment or your test environment, certainly before you put it into your production environment. Again, as we've talked about, when you think about the automation journey, you're going to have pain points that you need to address. You're going to have processes that you need to address. And then how do you prioritize as you work through this? As you see at that graph at the top, it's kind of small, but from a cost perspective, there will be an increase in cost, right? There will be a small hump at the beginning because you will need to address skills, right? The skill gaps. You will have to look at different team members that you have. You will have to look at new platforms that you may need to ingest, process changes, so on and so forth. And so as you bring those in, that will incur a cost. But like we talked about earlier, if we're doing this in an agile fashion, you're able to start offsetting those costs in a very rapid fashion. And now you're able to start impacting the business, start saving CapEx, and start seeing the money and the revenue potentially flow back into the business at a much faster pace. One of the things that I do want to hit on as we go through this, and I've seen many examples of this where customers have tried to rush to a solution or they haven't done the processes, no matter how much I hit on it. They haven't addressed their operational needs. Automation is a really good way to destroy your infrastructure at the speed of code, right? You want to make sure that you have the appropriate processes in place, the appropriate operational fallbacks in place, the restoration capabilities. So that is something that you need to address. Otherwise, you may just fail at a very large scale, and that's never a good feeling for anybody. So as I start to wrap up here, one of the successful things around process and projects is having all three aspects working together: people, processes, and tooling. I would suggest you leave tooling towards the end of your approach. I'm guaranteeing you, a lot of you already have a lot of tools in place. You need to understand what you're wanting to do, where you're wanting to go, what your vision is, how you want to get there, what your timeframes are, what skill sets you have inside your organization already today before you start looking at the different tool platforms and understanding how those are going to make your organizational automation environment and your automation infrastructure come together. And again, it doesn't all have to be done in one go, right? A lot of you will have platforms and tools available that you can leverage today to get started on this journey before you ever invest in any more tools. So just something to think about. From an implementation strategy, hopefully this makes a lot of sense to you. But again, from strategic perspective, you want to know what you're trying to achieve. What is the initiative that you want to achieve? And then do you need to create any new ones? But you're going to design it, you're going to build it, then you're going to test it. From there, you're going to look from a quick win perspective. You're going to look at a smaller environment. You're going to go for a quick win, either that be a single platform, a single switch environment, a single application that you may be deploying, and roll that out, right? So what is the proof of value? What is the proof that it actually worked? And adopt those as use cases, manage those as individual projects in an agile fashion. Make sure that you can address the simplicity and the success of those, and then learn from those mistakes, right? As you do that, from there, now you can start to scale it out. Now you can start doing it on a larger organizational perspective, but understand, how do you operate that? That is also going to be very key, right? Just because you can do it doesn't mean that your operations staff is also up to speed. So that's something else that you need to think about. As you do this, take those learnings and lessons and then drive that optimization into the environment and then bring that back, right? And start all over again. So making sure that you have the validation for the business value. Was what you just did successful? Did it bring value to the business? Did it actually achieve the objectives that you were looking for? The governance oversight, is that in place? Is it learning from what you have and what you've done? And will it succeed moving forwards? Again, these are all learnings and optimization that you can take forwards. one thing that I want to finish on for me, there really is no right path to this overall issue, right? So from a business perspective, I know I harp on that a lot from a business automation, business process, business operations, but that's just one aspect. And as you can see from here, the reality is it's probably going to be a crooked environment, right? You're going to deploy. If you think back to the baby steps that we were talking about, doing a proof of value, that's my business aspect. Now let's go do it in a real world environment or do it as a proof of value. How did I achieve agility? Can I move forwards on a further technical perspective? Did it lower my OpEx? Did it improve my time to market? Did it improve my zero touch provisioning where I don't necessarily have to deploy somebody across the country to make things happen? So as you can see, it is a crooked path, but you will get there, and understand that the strategy and the vision and the plans that you put in place will need to adopt over time. There is no one create and that's it, and then that's what you operate from. You have your learnings, you have your optimizations that you need to address. And so how do you move that forwards? So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Steve and have him talk to you more about different challenges inside the data center and how we can help you address those. Again, if any questions, please feel free to reach out. Our contacts are at the beginning and the end of this presentation. So thank you very much. And Steve, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Steve Kelly. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Arganteal. I think we can help you organize a significant piece of the automation journey that Pete's been discussing. I want to revisit one of his slides here about data center solutions. Agile software development, which we're all kind of striving for, if not there, produces lots of small new workloads, which are typically distributed to numerous systems manually. Go forward, Pete. That's kind of leading to operational chaos, because all of a sudden there's a lot more tasks, a lot more small tasks, but a lot more tasks, and it has to be deployed to a lot of places. Arganteal is focused on this upside of DevOps. Making your team more efficient doesn't mean laying off people. There's work getting left behind every day. I'll talk about that more in a minute. We estimate, as we said, 100 million hours a year are spent on operational issues, and that's probably a conservative figure. Why? Because the code is manual. It wasn't even considered to be reusable. Hey, in the near future, automation is going to be a necessity, and it can save countless hours. In March, the Wall Street Journal published an article stating that there's 1.5 trillion in operational technical debt that needs addressing nationally. That's why you're not going to lay off anybody. Just so you understand the size of the problem, there's hundreds of scripting languages kind of on the left side of this slide. That results in different platforms and libraries and scripts to do a job, and there's hundreds of those. The middle graph shows the equivalence of those capabilities across different cloud platforms. So the problem is, if I learn how to do everything on AWS, it doesn't help me with Azure, Oracle, or Google. Then there's and that also leads to a significant problem with hybrid clouds. Platform scripts, which are the ones we typically talk about, are everywhere, but there are just as many bare metal scripts out there, and they can cause big problems. For example, the CrowdStrike problem on Kubernetes that happened recently was a bare metal script. That means it had to be applied locally. That's why it was such a big problem. Our platform can handle that. We managed to pull all this together into a single platform, and that's called Adept, the Adept platform. And basically, it works with any cloud platform. It works with any operating system. It works with a plethora of the technologies that are out there in the industry. And most importantly, it works with any scripting languages. If there's a language we don't support, we can support it in about a month. So that leads to a phrase we coined, which is deploy any technology with one methodology. So we actually have two products. The one I just showed is Adept, and it's IT problem agnostic, it's platform agnostic, and it's language agnostic. It was developed over 5 years and introduced a year ago. The Air Force helped. It's probably not something you want to try to do on your own. I'll leave that alone and talk about the other one. Customers have led us to want to do something called ASCOT, so we did. And that is, you have your script scattered all over your organization, and if you're going to start an automation journey, you got to go collect what you have and figure out what it's for. We use AI techniques to do that. And just so a minor point, this is not generative AI, it's a closed loop AI, but it will go collect all your scripts, discover and classify them and summarize them so you can figure out what you have and what you might want to reuse. We sort of joke that it covers any language from COBOL to Kubernetes. We also offer professional services that can go along with that. You may want us to help you get started. We will then turn it over to you as you're ready. Next. I'm behind. Hang on. We'd like to continue this conversation with you. And as you can tell from Pete's presentation, he has a deep background and experience with Cisco stuff and with automation in general. I suggest you may want to do a one-on-one conversation to discuss your issues and where you might want to go with him. He can help you make sense of that. After the meeting, we'll try to schedule some follow-ups. And then we can also demo the product. And for that, you might meet with Jason McDaniel, one of our senior engineers, and he can take you through a Patch Tuesday demo and preview how Adept and ASCOT work. These are fairly deep tech products, but they solve the organization problem that you're going to face, and they'll keep you on track as you go down that crooked ladder that Pete described. That's it. That's what we wanted to cover today. Thank you, and I hope this was useful. Please accept our call to have a further discussion with you. Thank you.